Talk Radio.
I'm really happy today to have with us Mark Pfister. Mark is one of the most unusual people I've met, and he's come up with a darn good concept that I wanted to share with our audience. But as we usually do, we always ask our guests first to say a little bit about their own personal journey. Mark, welcome to the program, and welcome to talking about you and your new company.
Don, thank you, and it's a pleasure to speak with you today.
So tell us a little bit about yourself first.
Sure. So my background for roughly the last 15 years, I consider myself to be a serial entrepreneur. I find specific businesses where I feel there is a need or a niche, and there are problems in those areas in some cases, and I form businesses in those specific sectors to solve those problems. My companies have ranged from technology service companies to executive management consulting firms, and typically we serve Fortune 500 companies as well as small businesses and startups. Across all of these companies, I've served as the CEO and have typically filled the leadership and strategy needs of these companies, and these are areas that I feel that are very strong for me.
Well, I know you've had a varied experience, and we were talking a couple of weeks ago, and the reason you're on the program today is because you've come up with a new idea and a new venture. So tell us about it.
Sure. Well, the current endeavor was born out of need. It is a solution to something that at the time I could not find, and when we were looking to grow a few of our businesses, specifically that I was running and was the CEO at the time, we wanted to grow these businesses geographically. We knew we had models that were repeatable, but we also knew we needed outside help to do this. So the first approach for us was to try to see if we could hire CEOs, a CIO, and a CFO for each of these businesses to allow myself and my partners to move to a board of directors to oversee and govern these particular companies. And through the process of interviewing CEOs and CIOs, and quite frankly, some of them very well known, we realized that it takes a very specific approach and background for someone to grow a business across the varying stages of a small to a mid and a mid to a large size company. And we just didn't feel that we had the right person, even across about 10 to 12 interviews, that we just felt we hadn't found that right person or people across the companies. So in my mind, I started to move to a different thought process of looking at if there were groups of advisors or specifically a already in place, ready to be hired board of directors that spanned experience across everything from technology to human resource, finance, product and marketing, retail and sales, all these different areas that we knew that we would need to help to expand this business. And quite frankly, the group didn't exist. So about 2.5 years ago, that became my main focus, was to build a for-hire board of directors that catered towards businesses and companies of all size, ranging from startups to small to mid and even large-size non-public companies. And that's where we focused our efforts. We've built quite a team, and the folks on this team, as I mentioned, span across all of these different expertise areas, and their expertise and knowledge it really is incredible for a company to be able to infuse this knowledge and experience into their company overnight.
Well, how do you identify people who have a need like this?
So our marketing...
Go ahead.
Sorry, so I was going to say our marketing is quite unique in that we don't have a specific, I'll say, approach to marketing. We're not going out and buying ads. We're simply just based off of the contacts that we've built over the years and the knowledge of our services or previous positions. The work has come to us that way. We are pretty well known across our industries, and between the advisors to our group as well as the core board members, most of this has been word of mouth.
Well, how does a person identify? We've had several people on this program who have talked about this. How does a small business identify that it has a need like this? By the way, I believe what you're doing is very valuable, but oftentimes, for instance, in a startup or even a company in the first 3 or 4 years, usually the owner manager is so self-consumed with what he's doing or she's doing that they can't look above and see the need for that. How does a small business person identify that he or she needs such a need?
Yes, and Don, you've hit the nail on the head with specific early on issues with many entrepreneurs as well as small and startup businesses, where in some cases the lack of a broad experience, both internal to that person that runs the company as well as, say, the partners or the groups they surrounded themselves with, it is hard to separate from that day-to-day tactical work and focus on the strategic. So there are specific ways that happens. Many times it's just out of sheer time. There's not enough time in the day for some of these entrepreneurs to get done what they need to get done, and they do start to look for outlets of how they can satisfy that need that they have. There's a key in my mind for an entrepreneur, and it's understanding a few things, especially as they go through the different phases of growth in their business. Number one is you have to realize that you're not an expert in all areas. And that doesn't mean that you can't be. It just means that when you're focusing time on your business, it's very likely you're going to have to focus expertise and other team members around you to get that expertise, whether it's internal or external to your business. That need is there, and it's very important for an entrepreneur to be able to identify that. I also think it's important to know when it's time to replace yourself. This is an interesting concept due to the fact that if you run your own business, or you're a partner in a business and it's a startup or any size business, you have to start to understand when your time is better well spent in other areas. And creating a spot that you're exiting or you're leaving in such a way where it's easily managed, meaning that you've created a repeatable process, you're bringing in somebody who has the skill sets and the knowledge to do that role effectively, and you're able to govern that role knowing that you've come from that role and you've built that role specifically. How do you govern that to make sure that it is getting better? So there is no silver bullet to this, Don, but I do believe that an entrepreneur needs to keep themselves educated and understand the indicators of when they're not being as effective as they could be due to the fact that they're too busy or they're just too far into the tactical that they're not able to pay any attention to the strategic side of their business.
Well, one of the biggest reasons for failure in small businesses or any business is sometimes they don't see the forest for the trees. And I gather what your group provides is the ability to look beyond the immediate and look at the more strategic parts of the business. Am I right on that?
Absolutely. So one of the things we initially do, and it's one of our first exercises when a company engages us as their board of directors, we specifically focus on their strategic roadmap for the next year, 2-year, and 5-year look ahead. Now, that first year may strictly focus on areas in a business where they have issues that need to be resolved, and that's fine. Every business has its issues. Every business has the capability to solve those issues. And with our services, particularly of bringing in what I view as a high-end board of directors, to me it makes that process a lot easier because we're able to infuse our experience in what works and what doesn't work into that process. So when those particular immediate issues are taken care of, we simply allow these companies, or guide these companies, I should say, to stick to this particular roadmap, the strategic roadmap. And we know those roadmaps change, the markets change, the economy changes. They may find that specific areas of their offerings do better than other areas of offerings that they have within their umbrella of services or products for that matter. So we're able to be dynamic in such a way where we partner with these businesses and they are part of the solution. It's not just the board of directors off to the side that's telling these groups what to do. These companies actually remain as the chairperson of the board, and we become their sounding board and infuse all of this expertise and knowledge into these companies. What's been interesting is that this is typically viewed as a service that is only for large companies or mid-sized companies. To me, looking back at some of my earlier entrepreneurial endeavors, I actually wished I had a team such as this early on. It probably would have changed the trajectory of many of my businesses. So we don't strictly cater only to large and medium-sized businesses. We work with startups. If the idea is good, we're able to engage with startups. If it's a small business and you're profitable and you're making progress, or even if you do have issues within your environment, we're a perfect fit for companies such as that. So it is a group that's not only catering to certain verticals or certain size businesses. We actually think it's never too early to engage a board of directors.
I happen to agree with you. You mentioned before we went on the air that you had a story that you thought might be of interest to our listeners. Do you want to talk about that now?
Sure. So going through the time frame of the two companies at one time that I served as the CEO of, and I was one of the co-founders of both of these businesses, we were going through these growth phases, and I believed that we had created a repeatable process to the point where we could have taken this process and basically opened up and repeated this process across different cities in the U.S. And our goal at one point was to take these companies nationwide. We also knew that we didn't have all the internal experience that we needed to do that, or the connections in some cases. So our business really was, for the most part, in the northeast of the U.S. So we did start to look at interviewing different CEOs and CIOs to replace us in those positions, to allow us to move ourselves to the board positions of these companies. And what we slowly found out was that we couldn't find the correct people to fit those particular areas. It either was an experience issue, it was well-established CEOs or CIOs that were very much so used to working in larger environments. We really needed someone that understood how to grow a business from a small to a mid-sized business across a pretty large geography. So when we were not able to find a specific group or a specific person to fill some of these roles, we started to look into a different concept of saying, do we build an advisory team? Do we build a board of directors? Well, building those types of teams is quite cost prohibitive. And I've always kept in the back of my mind that if I was ever to do this as a business, that the cost side of this, especially working with small or large-sized business, or I should say small or startup businesses, we need to make sure that we're very affordable to those companies. So long story short in this, I got to the point where in those companies I sold my shares, but I had never forgotten about this concept of something that I would have used and I would have purchased or paid for, and quite frankly would have shared profits in my business or even equity in my business at the time to allow for this infusion of knowledge and experience. So for the last 2.5 years, we have built that team. We have built a team of board of directors, specifically focusing in areas across business that we view as important at any stage or any growth phase of business. And folks not just having on this team expertise, but also having operational experience, being able to operationalize ideas that they've come up with. We all know that just because you have a great idea, it doesn't always mean it can be implemented. So to me, it was extremely important to have expertise of team members on this board that are able to take an idea to fruition, to actually implement it and bring it to an operational stage that can be governed. So if this group was available at the time of my businesses, it's very likely that this would have been a group that we would have engaged to help us grow our business. Now I'm sitting on the other side of this as the chairman and CEO of this company, Integral Board Group, and we are helping companies early on with, I should say, whatever stage in their business, early on is very helpful for them, to put structure and strategic guidance around their businesses. In some cases, there is no need for a company to go through the school of hard knocks when we can already tell them what that path is. We've done it before. We've made some of those mistakes. We know what the right way to go is, and we know the outcome of those areas and those roadmaps and those paths. So in a nutshell, Don, that's exactly where we're focused today. We are a for-hire board of directors, and we're able to overnight infuse this expertise and this guidance and this governance into the companies we work with.
Well, is it also, when you bring people like that, of that caliber onto your board, does it make it easier to find money to grow?
So that's a point I'd love to speak a little more about, and I'm glad you asked that question. So one of the things we've tried to avoid is we do not want to be viewed as solely a private equity firm or a venture capital firm. To me, in many cases, that model is wrong by leading in with the money and then coming up with your strategy as a secondary function. To us, the roadmap and all of the strategy around where our business should go should be the first step. So we lead in with the knowledge and the experience, and the secondary function is that if it is agreed along with the company we're working with and partnering with, if it's agreed that they require money to expand, we can absolutely help with that. So we do have the outlets through private equity. Our CFO on our team specifically has the contacts and the connections through private equity in the investment banking field. We just believe strongly that that is not the area to lead in with. You should lead in with the expertise first, and we can help these companies both as outlets to gain private equity, but also if they want to go and look for private equity in a bidding type scenario, we can help prepare them and their business to to be in the best light for these types of capital infusions.
Well, that's important because, as you know, the major cause of failure in new businesses are lack of financial management. And I always ask that question of people because that's the one that really puts people into a bind. Let me ask you this, Mark. How do people reach you? What's your website?
So the website is integralbg.com. So integralbg.com. And on that site, it talks specifically about how we engage, how our board of director services operate. And another area of interest is likely going to be how our network of connections, based on the time we've spent in industry, can typically bring business to the companies that we partner with. So to me, any type of group can get together and say that they're able to come up with strategy, but bringing these connections to the table that can help grow the businesses that we work with is of huge importance as well.
Well, that's the part that really intrigued me when you were talking about it, because on our program we have an awful lot of startups and people who are in the second and third stages of growth, and they all talk to that one thing, to identifying the contacts to go to the next stage. And that, to me, is one of the most important aspects of what you bring to the table. I guess to sum up, what advice would you give our audience? We always ask our guests to say, what are the one or two things you've learned that small business leaders should really take to heart in building a business?
Well, the first thing that always comes to my mind is that I truly believe, and I think that all entrepreneurs should believe, that anything is possible. To me, it doesn't come down to how smart you are. It's about the effort you put in and the homework you do to make sure that your idea is something that is marketable. I also think that an entrepreneur has to keep themselves as strategic as possible. I see many a great idea and many a great company in their early stages of startup where they do quite well. But they get specifically bogged down in so much of the tactical day-to-day work that they lose focus on what's next. Technology, especially in companies that we advise and companies we work with, I think once they find a solution, they feel that that's the solution for that company for the next 10 to 15 years, and that's not always the case. So it points even more importance to staying as strategic as possible and doing yearly evaluations on your business. Understanding that things do change regardless of what you see in your industry today. There are folks that are out there that are coming up with the next best idea, and it's very important to stay abreast and understand where those technologies in this case are coming from or where those ideas are going, because they do change very quickly.
Well, you know, the essence of change is change. It's amazing how people have forgotten that in this day and age. I guess what final thought would you give our audience today about you, your company, or what you've seen out there?
Well, I think that we're in very interesting economic times right now. So although companies or entrepreneurs may have great ideas, I think it's infinitely important to make sure that we understand where the markets are going. So we see the stock market at record highs right now. We see companies are picking up in their hiring. All these indicators are fairly positive indicators. But to me, it's very important to understand why those indicators are there and why they're trending in that manner. Because as we've learned in 2008, that can turn in an instant. So it's extremely important for me, for businesses, to always look at not just the good times and how businesses grow, but also be prepared should something happen in the markets. Be prepared for the negative sides as well. Those are the companies that survive.
Well, Mark, thanks for joining us today. We're going to invite you back in a couple of months to talk more and perhaps bring one or two of your client companies with you, and we'll have a real round table on it. I think our audience would really appreciate it.
Very good, Don. I would be very interested to do that, and I thank you for your time today as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Come again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening tonight. All of our guests are invited because they offer actionable advice to our audience. They do not pay to join us, but rather demonstrate their capacity for helping our audience add profits. Thank you for listening, and we'll be here again next week with other experts to talk about ways to improve your profit picture. Remember, we're here every week at blogtalkradio.com/smallbusinessdigest. If you like what you heard today, tell others about our efforts. If you would like to be a guest or suggest topics for future hours, email me at info@smallbusinessdigest.net. That's info@smallbusinessdigest.net. We would also like to remind listeners that besides our radio efforts, Small Business Digest comes to you via the web, through our video channel, and in our magazine. You can subscribe for any or all of these by going to smallbusinessdigest.net. That's smallbusinessdigest.net. Thank you, and have a good day.